All right. Hi, everyone. It's Sierra and Brandon from Small Talk is.
Brandon.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. I think by the time this is coming out, it's going to be like just past all the holiday nonsense into the new
I
year,
know.
2025.
Feliz Navidad.
Pretty good stuff walking into the new year with still. So thank you guys for hanging out with us and enjoying the podcast. I
Yeah.
think today we're going to talk a little bit about the phrase agree to disagree. And we're going to talk about how we think it might be best to conduct ourselves when we're dealing with difficult topics, trying to have hard conversations. We touched a little bit on that in the last episode where we pointed it out that we were just like, okay, I think it's very important to say that we had a very cordial discussion about things that are normally not very cordial at all in the public sphere. And it's possible. And I think it should be the norm. Like, I think we should probably try to aim at that as a society. And we are trying our best to set the examples. And so today we're going to get more into just the intricacies of dialogue, I think. Brandon, what do you have to, any thoughts?
Yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, to our audience, I think it's super important for you guys to really take with you or see if it resonates. Like, when was the last time you avoided or even participated in a conversation that was, in fact, difficult or led to a feeling of conflict? Not necessarily, we're not asking you guys to go out there and set these verbal bombs with people, but I do think it's important to start asking yourself and selves and within your communities, which is the season's kind of topic and breath, is like, hey, what can I do as a participant and person in these types of situations? Can I be the beacon of strategy? Can I be this element of change by my own behavior? And I think that's what me and Sierra really try to exude. Like one of our big values about Still is that we leave our ego at the door. We don't really bring any of that. And sometimes I think ego is a big driver around lighting the concept of conflict or diffusing it, depending on where you are on the spectrum. So I think that's kind of what we wanted to kind of really expand more onto the thought process, right? Like, don't you think that's where we're at?
Oh yeah. Great point to what you said just now. So you, I think so. You said something like I can't remember it exactly, but like how to deal with it when it's like the conflict is brewing, right? So when Brandon and I first got together about this topic, and we were choosing what we were going to talk about, giving it the episode names and all that stuff. I always like bounce ideas off people. So the first person I go to is my husband, and I said, I have this question, right? The phrase agree to disagree actually like really bothers me. I don't like it at all. Um and I told him, I was like, I think I fall on the extreme end of the spectrum here. Like self-admitted, I am way out in right field, if you would, when it comes to this phrase. And I think I don't know if I'm like wrong, but I think it might just be a little bit too far. And so I'm always asking. And so I posed the question to my husband. I was like, if someone is sort of like, I don't want to say ignorant, but like bigoted to something about the truth, or something that's just like objectively truth, like a fact that other people wouldn't argue about, and they're just intentionally being like that, how do you go about having a discussion with that person? And he's like, to be honest, I would probably get so frustrated I wouldn't know what to do. And then I kind of like bounced that question around. I asked my mom. I had my haircut today. I asked my hairdresser, and like all these people, it was interesting. Some people fell on the end of, not my circus, not my monkeys. Other people were a little bit more with me, and they were like, yeah, no, if they're kind of denying objective reality, then, you know, every situation would be handled differently, definitely depending on how you know that person and the circumstance and whatever, right? You wouldn't want to be rude. I'm not saying, top down enforcement, meh, my way or the highway kind of stuff, but like she definitely was more in line with me as far as like we might have a moral obligation to try to change these people's minds. Like, where's the line here? It's kind of, are you allowed to agree to disagree over fact? I don't know.
Well, I like how you just said moral obligation because I think that's what it turns into. It legitimately turns into this concept of like we always talk about checking in with yourself first. Like where are you personally before you even put yourself in a platform pedestal or anything to that type of register? And I think it starts with your moral compass. Like if you are a person that has the value of saying, you know what, it's not my job, but it is my belief and faith and practice and personality to want to implement or infuse a different direction of thought for someone else to have in their lives because I feel that it will take them to a completely different expression of their behavior. That's
Mhm.
a choice. And that's a moral reality that people every day that we all fight around. I also think there is the toxic side of that same philosophy where people take that same generalization and say, I'm going to spread and infuse bigotry, hatred, prejudice. I'm going to, all of that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's this balance of yin and yang. So I don't think the term agree to disagree is it's a terrible quote, yes. But
Mhm.
I think it's an internal one where then we can start internalizing that saying, like, am I going to agree to disagree with this person? Sure, you can do all that, but to make it a phrase of expression to either end, diffuse, or spark a conversation with someone, that is where we may have the bottleneck. And I think that's where in this platform and in our show,
Mhm.
I agree. It does create this bubble of like, wait, what? No,
Yeah.
that creates digital distance. That creates the ability to not expand on the horizons around people and their thought process. By allowing yourself to set the stage with the automatic tone that we're going to disagree, and there's already automatically this auditory tone in both of us to hear each other in the form of saying, well, I'm not going to agree with you regardless what you're saying, but I'm going to open listen to you. That sounds like a completely hypocritical statement. So I agree with you, Sierra. I think that sentence and that phrasing should kind of be stripped from how we want to commute with each other. But I do
Mhm.
see the narrative that people have allowed themselves to participate in as they say that I'm a really good communicator. I don't agree with that. If you have a moral compass, that should be your only deciding factor in how you want to engage with people. That's it.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty fair. That's actually what you said earlier. My hairdresser brought that up. She's like, sometimes people will use that phrase just as a way to diffuse a discussion because they don't. Well, not well. So I'll bring this back to me personally. What I found is when people use that phrase, a lot of times they haven't actually thought out their position all the way through. And so what happens is they think they believe something. And when they get met with the slightest bit of evidence that might kind of be contrary to what they think they believe, then they say agree to disagree because they don't want to be caught in a discussion where they don't have the moral high ground or the ability to discuss it because some people are embarrassed by the fact that they don't know. And I would much rather have the dialogue, I because that happens. You get caught and you're like, man, I haven't thought about that. There's no shame in that. But if you just say agree to disagree to shut down the conversation, like, well, that's kind of like, I don't know. That's not fun. I don't
Well,
think.
I feel
You gotta
like,
figure
yeah, yeah, I feel like either it's a weapon or wisdom. Like, that's what it is. And like,
it out, actually.
in this case, I think a lot of people use it as a weapon. It's not a form of wisdom. It's not a form of like, huh. Like, for instance, and I will give this as an example because I'm pretty sure if anyone has been watching us from day one, they have seen and noticed that Sierra is the perfect person who automatically grabs and says, Brandon, I don't think you're using that word correctly. Or the way that you're seeking the sentence structure of your definition or your thought process is I'm misunderstanding it. I don't look at her and say, well, I agree to disagree with you about how I'm using the word. It's more like, huh, let me become more clear in the moment with the person who's providing me with an advancement to actually grow, receive information and knowledge. I don't look at it saying like this is a disagreement because I feel stupid or whatever the case may be. It's like, huh, perspective is the it's like is the propeller of how we get better at communicating with each other or with other people. This is why I think it's important for like a show like this to make sense for people because we don't have to be in this place of putting each other in these places or putting each other down or having these hierarchies around intelligence and things like that. It can be an, a kind of this ongoing rotation of experience. And instead of us being like, I'm right, you're wrong, superior, inferior, you know, you know, higher, higher, higher. I just was like, you know what? I could probably learn more from a person who has a lower economic status or hell is even homeless than a person who has $1 million mansion and has a multi-million dollar business. You have no idea these days. And I feel like we've never had that idea because we've allowed certain things like this, agree to disagree, to decide how we allow information to kind of be our guide. And I think this is a perfect point to that thought process. Being like, look, I
Mhm.
think it's crap. Like, why disagree? Because disagreement allows this halt around people's evolution and understanding of what could be more. And I think this is why we brought this up. So I love the fact that we brought this topic up, but I think it's bigger than what, because like even when you say it, it just has this depth to it, this
It
cold,
does.
close, like agree to disagree. Like
Mhm.
who wants to pick up a conversation right after you say that with them? Like, who wants to? I don't. Agree to disagree. It's almost like saying, shut the F up. Like, you're an idiot.
Pretty
And I'm like,
much.
well, that was warm and fuzzy. I appreciate that
Yeah.
gesture.
I think that also kind of
Yeah.
speaks to how the culture has evolved, you know. And this well, so this tags into what I actually want to get into about, you know, the objectivity of reality. Some people disagree with that. They're kind of like moral relativists and they think everything's subjective and I don't lean that way. I lean the opposite way. Um but the people who tend to lean more towards reality as subjective feel like I hear this phrase as a shutdown from them quite a bit. And I don't know if I feel like we've been doing that for, my God, 50, 60s. How long have we been doing that? You think it's been normal in the culture? Like it doesn't seem to be working, you know? Like this sort of attitude that we've
Well,
had, the subjectivity and agree to disagree and this and that and your circus, your monkeys, my circus, my monkeys, like we've been doing that for a long time and society is very divided and not able to tolerate each other. And I don't so I don't I'm not sure that's a winning strategy, you know?
I honestly feel like once I even let it in my own mindset and body around like morality, and then we talked about our episode around conformity and individuality, I think, and even with the post I sent you earlier today, I literally think it's just because people stopped resonating internally with themselves.
Oh,
That's
that too.
it. It's it's like the moment you stopped asking yourself, where am I in all of this? I don't like whether I let in the feedback or let in the criticism or let even the dialogue from another person, where do I stand without infiltration of something else? Like there's certain things that I should come to the stage with, period, if I'm going to participate in these conversations. And I think that's where it begins. Where do you stand? Where is your flooring? Where does your room of reason begin? Because then you don't have to let other people come into your house or your mindset and redecorate, and then that's your new reality. It's like I have a clear understanding of what my platform is, and it does not have to change, and it is not up for remodeling by the visitors of other people. I don't have to. And I think also that doesn't mean that I also have to live in this place of disagreement being a part of my decorative design. I don't have to live like the moment someone says something that I don't like the color of your walls, agree to disagree. Okay, well, what about the wall is opposing to you? It's a level of more saying, hey, if we're going to be amongst each other and communicating and have dialogue that is always involving and never ends. I'm not going to let it say it saying that you're telling me that you don't like my wall color as a direct attack against what my framework is. Because at the end of the day, it's my wall. I don't have to have it measure to what other people want to experience. It's my wall because I got to look at it and I fucking built it. So like the measure in which I let people kind of come into my house and decorate for me is a part of the moral code that most people don't really check in with themselves or don't take access to say, I need to make sure my moral floor is as I want it. because people are going to step on it regardless and have their own individual experiences. And that is the challenge in which, if I'm opening my floor to other people, I should be open to hearing how they feel on their floor. That's it.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good. Do you have any do you think that people come up with their own morals, or do you think that they can choose, like how do you think that works? What do you see?
Well, I like a lot of our off-air research. I've been listening and being exposed to a lot of Joe Dispenza. You listen to your guy who I cannot remember his name to save my soul at this point in time. But we both are in this facility around neuroscience and behaviors and just personal developments. And a part of me also says, like, as children, as infants, of course, some of our exposures around who we are, our moral compasses and guides, are around the experiences, exposures of our environment, the people in the environment, and the things that we hear. Sure, there comes a point in our adult brain lives that we start to develop our own personalities, what we're willing to do, what we're not willing to do, what we agree with, what makes us feel comfortable, what makes us feel safe, what makes us feel seen. Those things are the things that I feel like that is the beginning of our moral compasses. I do feel like sometimes, in order in our current society, when we are feeling attacked or unsafe or safe or seen, we follow the comfortable feelings that those things seem to outlie. I again say it's still up to us to really sit with ourselves to say, what does that really do for me when I sit quietly with myself? Not amongst that group that made me feel safe or seen, but amongst myself after maybe that experience or exposure or visual interpretation of what I've seen. For example, as a kid, I was in Chicago, the South Side, blah, blah, blah. There were all these other exposures in my life that would categorize me to follow certain types of music, certain types of lifestyle experiences, and certain types of racial and ethnic, stereotypes. Absolutely. But I myself, even as a kid, did not seem to follow them. I always said there has to be something else. I'll give a perfect example. I'm pretty sure I've used it several times in my life, and people who know me have probably heard this. But like, there was a time, and I cannot give it specific dates or times I consider that. I can only give it like a begin and end. But like, my grandmother would take us out to the mall, and like we would have this like shopping experience with her, where she would say like, okay, if you can add up all the cost without a calculator, she'd get it for you. I remember myself wanting like Converses, red Converses. My cousins and sister did not. They're not on that jam. That's when like I'm gonna age myself to the high ends by saying this, but like Jodeci boots, OPP jackets, Jordans. That was the shit that they were into. I wanted a weird ass ring and red Converses. That was just who I was. But I was still in that environment in which would say to people like, well, he lives in the south side of the hood. He should be gravitating towards this, and this. But I didn't. That I feel like is the beginning of where my moral compass, where I sat with myself, unbeknowing, because I'm a child, or a young child, saying, and does it click with me? And I didn't sit with it and say, well, everybody else is doing it, so I'm going to do it. That's just kind of, so I feel like those components are what make these kind of facilitations of thought around agree to disagree. It's like, well, that starts internally. Like that's a statement that needs to kind of only be said internally, because you could be missing out on the opportunity for yet another opportunity for yourself to gain moral, alignment or ascension. But when you immediately use it as a weapon instead of wisdom, that's where I feel like we have the problem. And so that's my thought process.
Well, so I noticed that you mentioned in the beginning, you said that you you think morals definitely have roots in your upbringing and your environment and stuff like that. That was good. I agree that that does happen. However, I'm still curious, like where, if you have any ideas on it, if you don't, that's fine. But if you have any ideas about where those morals come from, even then, like obviously, maybe not like you're as a kid, you're not gonna know. But hindsight 2020, looking back, the morals and that compass that you picked up on, where do you think that came? Like I know it happened probably in the environment, but outside of that, where did they come from? Where's the roots of the roots? Like
I
I think that's
I
important.
feel like I can feel like if I think about it, like physically, some of them are physical markers of response. Like I got this sick feeling, or I got this really joyful feeling, I got this really elated feeling around certain things that I thought about. So if something gave me this this like utopian kumbaya, like, oh my God, this is where I'm supposed to be. I feel connected to whatever this feeling is, or that phrase is, or that converse is. That's how I knew that it was meant for me. Just like I knew I felt so fucking stupid putting on a pair of Jordans, or I felt so out of place putting on the things that my cousins liked. I
Mm,
just felt out of my skin, like I wanted to rip this off. Like I did not feel a perfect example. I wanted to do something, it wasn't for me, but I did it anyway because it was for my father and it was for graduation. So for graduation of high school, I didn't, I don't really give a shit. Like we were gonna wear our cap and gown, but my father had this whole thing about making sure you look nice and presented yourself in a way that people could resonate with. Blah blah blah.
mm,
He put me in this, all white two pant top garment, and it was so him, so him, that I was like, you know what, it is what it is. But during the entire time where I had to wear that instead of just my cap and gown, I was like, I look like Puff Daddy's understudy. Like I just can't, I cannot get with this jam. But I looked nice, sure. People saw me as Brandon looked really nice, da da da. I just felt so fucking uncomfortable. But that's how I knew that that kind of shit wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. Like I was like, I'm doing this. But when it comes to like knowing what is for me and what my work, it's that feeling. It's like this is like just like you said. If you put on a dress right now and someone was like, Sierra, wear this dress and da da da. You look so cute in it. You'd be like, get this thing off of me. And it'd be a
right.
feeling. It wouldn't even be a vibe. It would be just like your body is like, if I could turn into a human lightning bolt, this fucker would be burnt off. That's the
Yeah.
feeling I think is what we decide. That's the feeling that I think that's what it is. It's those emotional, those physical responses around certain things that help align our moral compasses. I think that's what it is.
Okay. So it sounds like well a lot, and I mean, I think that there's probably some truth to this about how when you're young, like there's the moral compass is not like 100%. Like it's a little bit there. It's definitely a little bit there. I think we're born innately with a little bit of a moral compass, and it
Oh
grows over
yeah, I
time.
feel like that's. I feel like yeah.
It like
I
matures
feel
over time.
like it. Yeah, because what happens when we get those disappointments or those challenges, or like in my case, I had to face so many negatives around what I felt was morale, or what I used to call the moral your moral your moral equations, where you have to kind of take a negative against it. Because there was a time in my life where I had to do very immoral things to survive, and acted immorally in order to kind of escape, whatever the case may be. But there was a negative
Yeah.
to morality in my life, and that too had a similar emotional physical response.
Mm,
And I feel like those are still the guides be saying this is immoral, and it feels immoral, but there's all these other elements that swirl into it. So, you have to take the good, the bad, the indifferent, the difficult into consideration around morality. But there is, like the world, pros and cons, cause, effect,
mhm.
negative, positive. But I think it all balances out in its own type of way. So
It's
I see it's like, yeah, it's like both. Like it's a give and take.
it's so funny that you say the feelings though, and the way you frame that just now. Would you call those feelings your gut instinct? Do you think?
I think I feel like it's both gut and intuition, but I think sometimes, but I also don't. I really want to dive into this maybe later in life, or even not later in life, but later, like later as months and things like that. But especially as we get into 2025, around gut and intuition, because there have been so many moments in the last 10 years of my life that I have had to rely on gut and or intuition to decide how I move forward
Mhm.
and how I see the world within the eyes that I don't let anybody look through, if that makes any sense. And that has led me down such a tumultuous terrain that I can't even begin to start unpacking it on the show. But it has led me to recognize what are the non-breakable links of my like mental lineage, like period. There's nothing that will penetrate that purpose behind what my intuition and gut give me.
Hmm.
And I think those two things are the reasons why I get up every day, we do the show, I have
Mhm.
my businesses, I haven't had not the connections that I still have in my life. I feel like those are the things that, I think still keep us within that moral compass around agree to disagree, or the stupidity of that phrase. Um,
Right.
and just the things that I apply myself in because even why we have our bond and even what drew us together as friends, it's like those are that gut, that intuition is why I think people have the bonds or don't have the bonds they have in their lives. So
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think it's both.
Well, I just think it's funny because back in season 1, you were telling a story about, there was like oh man, you'd have to go back. It's like one of the first or sorry, one of the last episodes of season 1, but you were telling a story about this guy who was bugging you at a bar, and you were like, "I wanna know your take on this. When would you have told him no?" And it was all the way at the staircase when you had there was a big difference in our do you remember that? Okay, so in that same conversation,
Yeah.
you made the argument that you essentially not that you didn't like believe in the gut instinct, but that it wasn't always the most accurate thing. And I was like, I think you need to think about that a little bit more. And it seems like now you've kind of turned over that leaf and you understand what I was getting at.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally get it because it's such a sense of comedy for me when I look back at like how I used to see myself in the world and how I actually probably maybe was in that point in time. Um, and I think it's important to recognize that you can't lie about your intuition. You can't lie about your gut because the results are going to be resonance of that regardless. So, as much as I like to put on this front and facade about, like, oh yeah, my gut told me this, no, it didn't. Your gut exactly did exactly what you were supposed to be doing. Your gut told your ass to walk down those stairs and ignore that fucker. That's what your gut told you to do. Your intuition was like, no, see what happens. But your gut was like, go the fuck downstairs. Like, there
Yep.
is no multiple choice when it comes to your gut. It's that simple. It is clear, concise. There is no room to disagree with your gut.
See? Well, and this is a
Like
great
that's just
example.
what it is.
Like, so I presented you as sort of like an opposing point of view that you had way back then. You have since then kind of migrated to a different one, and you were open, like, I'm not saying you were, like, closed-minded, like, in that moment, we were on the couch and we were talking, and you were like, "Maybe" I think you even said, "We might have to agree to disagree," in that conversation, which is actually ironic as hell, and
I
then
probably fucking did. I probably did.
yeah,
Oh,
I was
I probably did.
time, you know, and then you did, and then you came around, and, like, look you know what I'm saying? There's no animosity, there's nothing, like the only reason why I even remember that is just because we're on this topic, you know, and it was totally random. Like I remember just now, not before we were shooting. That was a live remembrance, if you would. But yeah, it's so cool to come full circle and see how when you're open minded, you know, it allows you to grow, and sometimes you don't even realize it happened. It's cool.
Yeah, for our listeners and viewers, it is possible to grow. Like it is possible to within the dialogue and connect with people that you can like again, it's a perfect example of what we just talked about. Instead of me just saying I'm going to agree to disagree always and never see a change or component of of variance, look at what happened naturally without me like I remember that I may have said that, but now I'm just kind of like I've probably since then have never put myself in a situation similar to that ever again.
Yeah.
All because of like what we've been doing over the season and what we take with it after we go off of air. Like every episode, I think we take something that I personally take something off the air, being like, and this is a new element of my life that I'm going to start to implement, practice, and even let sit in with me to see if it resonates with my moral compass. If it doesn't, it goes away. But if it does, kind of sticks around. That's just kind of how I roll with it.
Well, so to wrap it back into sort of like how to have cordial discussions around like really difficult topics where it starts to get kind of it is tricky to navigate because a lot of times we get personally invested in these
Mm-hmm.
topics. And I think people's ability to, or rather inability to separate themselves from their belief and be able to articulate it and be clear with it, that's tricky. So what do you think are some good practices that you've noticed as you've evolved as a human? Like how do you conduct yourself in these difficult conversations? What do you notice that you do? Or maybe what do you notice has changed in over the years?
I think for me, and this came to my mind, when you're having a difficult conversation, remember it's a conversation, not your conscience, because it's a
Yeah.
conversation. It has nothing to do with your conscience. It has nothing to do with your morality. It has nothing with who you are as a person. It is a conversation. Conversations do not have to link themselves directly to the extension of who you are and what you're about. It is a form of expression using language and dialogue. It does not have to be this earthquake about who you are, your equity of integrity. It does not have to do that. It can just be a conversation. Like our last episode, these are all different elements of like who we are and where we stand individually has nothing to do with how we feel about certain things as two separate entities of importance. That is your placement in your world and life. And in the reality that we both coexist in, there is going to be a balance of imbalance. We cannot all be kumbaya. But I can respect the parameters of our purpose. That's it. I don't have to sit there and it's not my job to change you and it's not your job to change me. But I can take the opportunity to learn a perspective that maybe
Mhm.
even makes my personal perspective more evolved, elevated, or even much more constructive around my intuition and ego. I do not have to sit there and say, she's wrong, so now I'm going to go back into my environment and make sure more wrong around her belief system is proven. Why?
Right.
It never changed in the first place. Conversation that leads into an element of like, red, blue. You don't have to say, well, let's make it purple. Fuck that. You can just say, well, blue is still blue for me. And I like the fact that you can see red. I can see a different shade of your red and you can see a different shade of my blue. Doesn't mean that we have to sit there and conflict or create this unison to make it purple so that everybody gets along. So fucking what?
I think that's fair.
Also,
So
listen. Shut up and
oh,
listen. Like,
oh, shut up and listen. Yeah. No, that's a good one. I actually have that written down in my notes. Yeah. No, well, so because I wasn't sure where this whole thing was gonna go. So I tend to I'm old school. I like to write down stuff on paper. So I wrote down a little bit of an outline of some of the things that I believe guide a good discussion. And I what did I say? Shut up and listen? No, what did I say? I said yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I was like being closed-minded and not actually listening. I hate it when people they nod along, and their eyes are like whoosh, like they're not listening. They're waiting for you for your mouth to stop moving so they can continue their thought. Like that's not you can't it's not a discussion. Oh man. Yeah.
it was so hard in my most recent, and it's still we still are it's still an accident, but like being a partnership business owner in an entrepreneurial sense, man, let me tell you, that takes, and to have years of experience between the two of us,
Yeah.
it took 4 years, I would say, 4 years of conflict, fights, aggressions, disagreements, discomforts, intuitions, all of it, for me to get to a place being like, Brandon, you truly have a sense of understanding about people. And you've been in the service industry of servicing people for a very long time. And somehow you've forgotten all of those elements that make you a great asset to that industry. You need to slow down. You need to listen phonetically, not objectively to where you can prove your point faster. You just need to listen, because in some of the things that you're hearing from from people and clients and things like that, you're going to get to the result where you're going to link what your initial intent was by having a conversation is. It's
Mm.
not so much browbeating the person being like, I'm trying to tell you this. No, it's the same philosophy around, I mean, being a salesman. It's like, don't sell them shit. Just talk to them, because you will find out within the environment that you're going to find out what they're looking for and what they need, and if you have the things that they're looking for.
Yep.
That's what it is.
That's true.
So
That's very true.
listening has a very powerful process if you know how to accurately navigate it, and that's all I get. Shut up and listen.
Well, so before I pose you this next question, do you have any outliers for me? I've been asking you quite a few questions. I feel like we should even the playing field. Did
Uh,
anything
no,
come up?
because sometimes I don't, no, because I guess the funny thing is, I don't know if you guys realize this. Sometimes I like it when it comes from a perspective that I don't have to think. I just get to express. I like the fact that Sierra is quite the challenger when it comes to thinking about perspective around things, because her brain works so phonetically around specific topics that I could be a little bit too kumbaya about. So I don't like rocking the boat, and I don't think she even cares if it's a fucking boat, rocket ship, or anything like that. She's like, this is the topic, right? She doesn't end these parameters around anything. I'm like, it's gotta be a nice little boat, and it's gonna swim. She's like, fuck your boat. I'm gonna put this on a fish on an airplane. So I always like it when she comes from this thought process, because then I ain't gotta think. I can just be like, oh, we're on an airplane, cool. I've never been on an airplane. So carry on. I know that was funny, but that's just legit how I feel.
Oh, that's literally my mom and I were talking about that this morning. Oh my god, it's hilarious. Just our natures. Like I'm a copy of my mom essentially, and it was very much to that. She didn't care if it was a boat or a plane or whatever. Anyway, that's funny. No questions, nothing really. Because if not, I'll pose mine.
Like sometimes I like to put things in the Brandonometer and be like, okay, so Sierra gave me this on her plane. I'm gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna go from plane to parachute. Boop, and then I have a question for her when she's like, oh, okay, it's a parachute. Cool, I can go with that too. We kind of give and take each other, but like that's kind of what I was getting at.
Okay, so then here's my question, and I want you to be as clear cut as you can be. So, do you believe in objective truth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Yes, and objective truth. Here, let me look up the word. Objective is pretty clear. Is clear and cut.
Well, I
I
can
think as it
elaborate.
resonates with me right now in my brain. What?
I can elaborate on that if you need me to. Give you examples,
Yeah,
or if
yeah,
you'd like to.
yeah. Elaborate. Yeah, please
So,
do.
the objective,
Yeah.
what I would categorize as objective truth is like, um, like looking down at where I'm sitting right now and saying, "This is a chair." I would, and so you can go from
Ah,
like
okay.
very, very like uh physical things to more philosophical and political things, and so I'll echo back to my sentiments from last episode where I said, I don't I don't believe that gender exists. I think there's your biological sex, which is unchanging. And I think there's your personality, like your temperament and who you are and how you're raised. And anything else is sort of downwind or downstream, and they're so like I don't believe in the concept of gender. I think that is irrelevant. I don't even think it exists. I think there's just biological sex and there's personality. Like I would consider biological sex an objective truth. You know, I would consider um, the the fact that in general, men are stronger than women. I would consider that an objective fact. Like on average, men are stronger than women. Like things of that nature. Like,
On,
what do you think?
on that. Um, so there are two places my brain went
Mhm.
in the forms of that explanation of the definition of objectivity, objective truth, and then subjective truth, because I think they both kind of should go hand in hand when you use the word truth involved, because one's an experience personally and one's a expression.
Okay.
Um, because I'll give an example. Subjective truth is, and I'll speak in a third person type of reality because I don't want to kind of streamline something that could resonate or it be a facility of something completely different. But let's say a person is going through a mental health issue where they hear things. Um, I feel like a person who's going through that type of subjectivity of themselves, their subjective truth is that they hear things, and those things that they hear are facilitating how they exist in their world. That is their subjective truth. And that subjectivity allows them either to heal, hurt, or hermit themselves from their reality. I think when that person is in a place where that subjectivity becomes objective truth, that could be a completely different space in which we have to look at that kind of reality. Does that make any sense?
It does. I would actually I'm gonna play language games with you here just a little bit. And it's not you actually, it's in general
Yeah,
because
that's fine.
the subjective truth gets thrown around a lot. And I think what people mean is experience.
Yeah.
Because truth, if you look
Yes.
up like definition of the word, there's no room for subjectivity in it. Subjective truth is an oxymoron. It doesn't exist.
No.
So I like subjective
Right.
experience. Not trying to say that, if
Yeah.
I think you
Okay.
said in your example you were hearing the person was hearing voices, whether or not those voices were actually there.
Hmm.
That's experience, right? And I would argue there's some truth that the
Right.
person is having these things, but whether or not another person would experience it is different. So I would say there's a difference between objective truth and like experience. Experience can fall within this,
Experience.
right? But I don't believe in subjective
Yeah.
truth. Like you and I can't sit here in this conversation and you tell me that I'm sitting on an elephant. That's just false. You know, like you can say,
Ha! Yes. And the funny thing is, yeah, and I feel like,
but it's not true.
yeah, exactly. And that's the funny thing about when I think around maybe objectivity is because is it open for interpretation based on experience?
No, I don't think so. If something
No,
is
you don't think
objective,
so? I
I
agree. I don't think.
be objective. Yeah.
Yeah, like because and I feel like that's a little bit of where I feel like that whole platform of agree to disagree lives in. It's like, wait, no, it can't. It can't genuinely sustain itself in any of those things
Can I give
because
you a really,
those technically. Hmm?
can I give you a really crazy example? It just came to me. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
sorry, your mic
yeah,
cut out. Um, okay. Let's say this is just roll with me. Just roll with it. Let's say there's a person that is like diagnosed officially, with
yeah,
some kind of dissociative identity issue, meaning there are like splits and alters and amnesia and like a lot of different stuff going on in their brain, right? To that person, based off of my like understanding,
yeah.
their experience would be that they feel as if there's multiple things going on, multiple personalities, multiple individuals, multiple whatever. But from the outside, objectively, is that true? And
Mhm.
here's the thing. This is why I don't think it's I don't think subjectivity holds water when it comes to fact. Like you can't have subjective facts because the objective fact, the reality of the situation is there is one person sitting in front of you. Their experience is that they have undergone some kind of horrible trauma, some kind of something that has compartmentalized their brain to the point where they are experiencing the world a little bit differently than you and me. But the objective fact is they are one person. Okay. And I think that this language gets muddied down like so fast and it's kind of scary.
Mhm.
But would you like agree with the way that I sort of
Yes.
presented that?
Oh, I feel like this also, just to your very point around your statement, goes into what we talked about off air around my feeling around mental health and disease and diagnosis and even um, prevention and medication and process around getting these people help. Um, is that yes, that very reality, that very sentence structure around like that person is in front of you, yet they are exuding the elements of compartmentalization that
Mhm.
create these ids or personas that create this now false phrasing of subjective reality or subjective truth or experience. I feel like that safety within that falsehood leads to these treatments and diagnoses that don't serve that particular one person. You're now putting them in a place where they're now serving those personas of compartmentalization instead of the person that is objectively in front of you. Does that make sense?
You lost me a little bit. Say it again.
So I'm a if I'm a if if I'm the person witnessing this person telling me that they have 9 cells,
Yeah.
right? But I know the core of themselves has honesty, ethic, morale, you know, cognitive function, blinking, breathing, blah, blah, blah. But my subjective treatment is only focused on one, two, or three of the 9 personalities inside the objective person where the compartmentalization is housed. Am I efficiently, effectively giving them the best thing that's for them?
Ah, yes. Okay, I follow. That's the right question, actually. That is the right question, and it's tricky. Yeah, diagnosing it or treating and well, I wasn't necessarily trying to get into the treatment side of it,
And
but
it's and
the the
but
diff
it was a very good example of how you took subjective and objective. So that's yeah, that's kind of what I was like. That's how it resonated with me because I was like, huh. Because we both love psychology, we both love the mind, we both love the brain.
Mhm,
So that was just a place that I thought we would go with.
gotcha. So it sounds like we
Yeah.
do kind of share that, like, we're pretty close. I think we mostly align on, like, the objective truth question, which is good. So what would you say to people who don't
Yeah,
believe in objective truth? What do you think?
yeah. I think, and it's been a real challenge for me. They've been living a lie. I just, I think, I think, um, I think when you can't allow something to kind of extend beyond your, then it's never going to be a window. If it's always been a wall of your reason and not a window to reason, then you're never going to look beyond that. So I think that's what it is. Like it's not that people are living these like closed off under a rock mentalities, but if you've always meant for yourself to see it as a wall and not a window, then what do walls do and what do windows do? Windows allow you to look out beyond something. Walls allow you to not go past it. And that's just kind of what I think this kind of really can resonate. I even asked some of our listeners and you know streamers and things like that. Have you really looked at the elements of your morale house? How many windows do you have and how many walls do you have within it?
Yeah.
And when was the last time you did a remodel that said, you know what, this was a wall before, I'm going to make it a window? And
Well,
that could be the challenge. And maybe that's the reason why I think, yeah.
The other thing would be, at some point, of course, it would vary a lot depending on the situation. But let's just say you're talking with someone you're familiar with and you know when you're friends with. Um, is it like the compassionate, ethically correct thing to do to allow them to sort of sit in something that's not true? Because this is why I don't care for this word getting thrown around either, which is bigotry. Bigotry, if you look at up what that word means, is essentially despite how much proof is shown to you that your
Mm.
beliefs are incorrect, you still choose to believe them. That's what the word bigot means. And bigot gets tied with racism and like a lot of other stuff really closely because of just how things have gone down in the country and history. And that's fine. There was a reason for it.
I
But
feel like I think it's the connecting. It's a connecting. It's a connection. I think the word pairing. I think is with blank opinion, public opinion, social opinion, personal opinion. I feel like bigotry is just the sister word or category or the thesauric version of the period get at the end of it, because bigotry, as you defined it, is still an opinion. It's a global opinion. It's a data based opinion. Like, it's just a higher collective of minds versus a lower collective of minds.
well, so you just made an argument for
And
like
that's
a
kind of what I think sometimes bigotry can live in, that because it only has relevance and weight to it when you have multiple minds.
are you sure?
Well, it's almost Americans
Does it have weight
had
when
brains. It was bigoted to think women were hairy. I mean, I don't know, but
sorry, there's a lot of delay
I
going
mean,
on.
it feels like when I've heard the word "you're being a bigot," is because you don't agree with me, and I'm only agreeing with a collective mindset. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
No,
It
it's
could
all
be my
good.
network.
It seems to
And it could
kind of
be, you know what?
yeah.
This could be a great way for us to wrap up this episode. Yeah. I think we should dive into this, specifically that word and what leads to even more a deeper disconnections and conflict concepts around communicating. And maybe I might want us to work that we don't allow more of that to exist in our world as we approach a level of raised opinions, raised elevations, raised existentialisms around our society. I think that's a really good way for us to kind of set up for next week, for next episode. What do you think?
Sweet. I love it. Next one will be about bigotry. I'm actually
Yeah,
really excited to get into that. I have a lot to say about that one. That's very exciting.
yeah,
I've been hearing a lot in the media sphere right now.
yeah, yeah.
Like, populism is becoming a thing. That argument, that sort of like theme of thinking has become a thing, and I'm like, oh, that's dangerous. So I'm actually very
Because
excited
it's
to
not, yeah, yeah. Because I don't really think we're at a state of division. I think we're at a state of that very ideology of people now feeling like we're surrounded by, quote unquote, this world of bigotry. And I'm like, it's got to be more than that. And I think we need to change dialogue early, at least within our platform, to make sure our community is not walking around here giving the same flame to the kerosene of that crazy.
I like
So
it.
I,
All right.
I just
Well,
think
so
that's the
then
best way
I
for us
think
to go about it.
next time we will dive into
So,
whether or not this is a question I would like to at least discuss, and then whatever you'd like to bring to the table, absolutely.
yeah.
What is so? How do I phrase this question? Is it ethically the best, most compassionate strategy to allow someone to remain in a bigoted view?
Excuse me.
That would be a good one.
I think the next episode should be titled um, "The Baseline and Benefits lack thereof of the word bigotry.
Ooh, that's good. All right. Well, all the Still podcast listeners, thank you guys for tuning in today. And find us on our socials on Facebook and Insta and YouTube. And we're glad to have you guys with us on this journey. And I noticed our last couple of videos, the views have been ticking up. So I think we're hitting on some good stuff. So if you like what we're doing, let us know in the comments below. Tag us on Facebook and Insta if you find something that you like that you want us to talk about. And we will see you next time. Bye, guys.